miracle has finally happened, and I've started actually reading and listening to books. I was notoriously bad at just dropping books right and left and reading them for years and years. But somehow this March I really stick to it, and I finished some books that I started a long time ago. So I'd like to share with you my learnings from the books that I've read. This will be Happiness Advantage by Shawn about how happy attitude helps in work and life. 2 books about the body functioning and how it affects our mood and behavior. 1 science fiction book about the future of AI, and another book about how the art of rethinking is extremely important in our society. So tune in if you're interested. So, in the month of March, my biggest achievement was actually finishing this book, The Happiness Advantage by Shawn, because I've been reading this book for 3 years and it's not even that big. And I realized it's like maybe 200 pages, and I realized why I've been reading it for so long. It has a lot of those, filler stories. There are like a few nice concepts that you derive from it, but most of the book is a lot of stories that are not so interesting. One of the value of reading is that I get to think through the concept and ideas in books. But when there is like few ideas and 200 pages of just stories and stories and stories, taking it over and over again, this is not exciting or interesting for me. So I dropped this book a lot of times. I learned about it from a TED Talk of this guy, Shawn. I actually recommend the TED Talk too. It's funny. And it talks pretty much about how we are in this perpetual loop of thinking that success will bring us happiness. So first we need to be successful, we need to land a cool job, get a good degree, and then after we get the success, we are gonna be happy. And you can see how much challenge is there with that idea, and Shawn Achor talks about that exactly, that success is something that can't drive happiness, but happiness can and will drive success. It's a bit common sense in a way that you know that you need to exercise to get the endorphins to be happy, or you know that you should try to come up with something positive from negative situations. So maybe as a reiteration of all those principles, it's really good. But not necessarily if you feel like this will make you happy. I don't think so. So there are 7 principles. The happiness advantage, like having positive brains have a benefit for your performance. Then how we experience the world is changed based on our mindset. He talks a little bit about neuroplasticity, how we're not supposed to think about ourselves as like, I'm just a grumpy person, because we can change that. It will just take a little bit more effort for someone that used to think that they're grumpy. Tetris effects, like getting stuck in a pattern of negative or positive thinking, and how you can change that. Following up, I think that's something really relevant for the 2020 and 2021, or for people who come out of like sickness or trauma or loss, mostly about trying to not necessarily flip the sentiment of the experience. I'm not saying that pandemic is great or anything like that, but you can find some things that you learned about yourself or you started doing that could be positive. So it's not only the negative part of it. Then something about the Zorro circle, where you get overwhelmed about trying to approach all the problems at the same time. And if you feel like you're overwhelmed, you should start with like small steps. 20-second rule, the paths of least resistance. So if you want to build habits, make them super accessible to you. Pretty much if you want to learn to play guitar, instead of having it somewhere in a cupboard, just put it out there in the middle of your living room. And then social investment. Can't really be happy without a good social circle, and it's really hard to read this after a pandemic where we all a lot of us spend a lot of time alone, and it's harder to build connection. Overall, not a bad book. Nice sentiment. I liked his TED Talk a bit more than the book, so I'm gonna link it down below. Check it out. So the next physical book that I read was this one. It's about the gut, the inside story of the body's most underrated organ. This is really good. This 300-page book reads just in a blink. It's funny, it's interesting, it's well backed by a lot of research, but also is written in a very nice, plain, simple, catchy way. Talks about pretty much how our digestion works, how the bacteria in our gut affects our digestion, our mood, our behavior. Some things are really interesting, like how much does different types of bacteria balance affects whether you're depressed, and how bacteria work and how to balance the good bacteria versus the bad bacteria. Everyone who has a body or has a digestion system, I think, should read something like this. And on the same point, a book that I read last month is this one, Period Power. Everyone who has a period or knows someone who has a period should also try to read this. It's a little bit longer, so if you're a person without a period, it might be harder to relate. And now there were quite a few books that I listened to. I use Audible because it has a lot of options, but I finished it. The problem with Audible is that they don't have a good syncing between different devices, even though that's why I got it, like so that I don't depend on one platform, because I have both Android and iOS. But sometimes you finish a book and on your Android phone, and then the iPad is like, yeah, you have 3 hours left. Anyway, the ones I wanted to talk about are the Bobiverse series by E.Taylor. This is a fiction sci-fi book about cryogenics, I guess that's how it's called. It's pretty much when you die and you give your body to freeze so that later in the future, when people know how to treat the reason why you died, without giving away too much detail, just want to say that it is about a guy who decides that he wants to be frozen when he dies. Then he dies, he gets frozen, and then he's revived 130 years later as a AI. For me as a data scientist, I don't think there was enough explanation of how could you scan your brain into an AI, and what does an AI here means. Is it like a machine learning model that's built based on your memories that knows how to make decisions like that person did, or is it something more complicated? He doesn't really open up the concept of synthetic consciousness, but the book is still fun regardless. There's a lot of concepts and ideas that you can think about, like how to traverse space, how to build things on your own, a lot of thoughts that you can have about the ethics of being an AI, previously being a human being. I kind of really recommend reading it, but mostly for thinking through all those concepts on your own, not necessarily just for the reading of the book, but the book is also a lot of fun, so check it out. Yeah, there is enough new concepts, and I think the best part of it is that it allows you to think more about future and AI and how will the world look like in 100 or 200, 300 years. So that's pretty cool. I think the best part of this food, of the syrniki made of cottage cheese, is actually the creme fraiche. This is more like a vessel for creme fraiche. Cool. I'm gonna finish off my tea, take the little puppy here for a walk. I really don't know how the sound will be. Let's see. So I just finished
listening to the book Think Again by Adam Grant, and that's probably the best book that I've read this month. It's mostly about how we should live in a learning culture where we approach everything like scientists, where we're rethinking our opinions and our beliefs, and we're not attaching our value to our beliefs and opinions, but more so have our own values that guide us, not the ideas we share or not share with other people. It's been super valuable while starting a new job because it kind of gives me confirmation that this approach is nothing to be ashamed of. There is nothing shameful in asking a lot of questions and feeling like you're a newbie and being really curious and open to different perspectives and opinions. And there are also a few very interesting concepts and stories and how rethinking helped NASA, or how motivational interviewing helps to persuade people to change their opinion. However, it's not really a purpose of the motivational interviewing to change someone's opinion, because while you're interviewing someone, you can also change your opinion. So really nice book. Really recommend it to everyone to read. It's quite an easy and short read, well phrased. There is no shame in learning. There is no shame in changing your opinion or changing your belief based on new information. He also talks a lot about Dunning-Kruger effect, where people who lack the knowledge usually perceive themselves as more knowledgeable than people who have the knowledge. That talks a little bit towards the imposter syndrome. So yeah, great book. Definitely recommend Think Again by Adam Grant. I'm walking the doggo back to their owners. Oh, I'm gonna miss her so much. She's so sweet. It's really nice to have a dog. I definitely had more time to read or listen to audiobooks while walking her. So now I have to just walk like a weirdo by myself and listen to audiobooks without a dog. This is Hammarbybacken, the only kind of ski slope in Stockholm-ish. There are slopes of every kind of difficulty level.